I never thought I'd have to expose who I really was. For years, I let my family believe I was the disappointment, the one who couldn't get it together, the charity case they reluctantly accommodated. But fate has perfect comedic timing. And sometimes, your moment of truth arrives precisely when you've been pushed to your absolute limit. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The Vargas family reunion was in full swing at my parents' sprawling lake house in Michigan, a 3-day annual tradition of forced smiles and thinly veiled competitions, cousins comparing careers, aunts sizing up marriages, and my father, ever, the patriarch, holding court on the deck overlooking waters that belonged to him, just like everything else. "Oh, Maya finally decided to show up," my mother announced as I walked through the door, her voice carrying that special blend of announcement and accusation she'd perfected over the years. I set my worn duffel bag down beside designer luggage that lined the entryway like sentries. "We weren't sure you'd make it this year," she added, air-kissing both my cheeks while maintaining a safe distance from my thrift store sundress. At 32, I'd mastered the art of emotional armor. Simple clothes, minimal makeup, nothing they could criticize directly. "Traffic from Detroit was bad," I said, though I knew that wasn't what she meant. My cousin Vanessa glided past in her Louboutins, perfect blowout bouncing with each deliberate step. "Just closed the Henderson merger," she announced to no one and everyone, flashing her senior partner badge from Blackwell & Associates like an Olympic medal. The senior partners are already talking equity track. I bit back a smile. If she only knew. "Maya," my father's voice boomed as he entered from the deck, scotch in hand. "Still at that little nonprofit? What do they call you there again? Program coordinator?" "Development specialist," I corrected quietly. At the Horizon Foundation, I kept a low profile. Sensible clothes, practical shoes, a desk in the back, corner of the open office. I blended into the background by design. "Well," my Aunt Gloria slurred, already 3 mimosas deep before noon. "At least it's something. Remember when you were selling those little crafts online after dropping out of law school? We were all so worried. I had an MBA from Wharton and a law degree from Yale. I hadn't dropped out of anything. But I just smiled and reached for a sparkling water. "The sleeping arrangements are a bit tight this year," my mother said, not quite meeting my eyes. "With Vanessa's children and your cousin Patrick bringing his new girlfriend." I knew what was coming next. "We've set up the pull-out couch in the garage apartment for you. It's actually quite cozy," she continued, her voice bright with forced enthusiasm. "And you'll have your own bathroom. Well, when the kids aren't using the pool shower." The garage? Of course. Because Vanessa needed the Lakeview suite for important conference calls, and Patrick's new girlfriend wouldn't understand, sleeping anywhere but the guest cottage. "That's fine," I said, though it wasn't. The garage apartment was really just a storage room with a bathroom added as an afterthought, smelling perpetually of motor oil and my father's fishing gear. "Maya doesn't mind," my father said, clapping, a heavy hand on my shoulder. "She's always been our practical one, not fussy like the others." Practical. Their code for unambitious, unmotivated, unworthy of the main house. As I carried my bag toward the detached garage, I caught snippets of conversation floating from the deck. "Still single? Such a shame. Always had potential, but at her age, you'd think." I closed the garage door behind me, set my bag on the dusty pull-out couch, and took a deep breath. The concrete floor was cold beneath my sandals. A single window overlooked the driveway rather than the lake. 3 days. I just needed to survive 3 days. My phone buzzed, an encrypted message from my assistant. "Sanchez contracts finalized. Legal wants sign-off by Monday." What my family didn't know, what I had carefully ensured they didn't know, was that 5 years ago, I'd founded Eclipse Ventures, now one of the most successful venture capital firms focusing on sustainable technology in North America. The little nonprofit, where I supposedly worked as a development specialist, was actually my private foundation, which I'd established to distribute over $40 million in charitable grants last year alone. I ran a billion-dollar company from my shabby apartment in Detroit, actually a converted warehouse loft that had been featured in Architectural Digest, while letting my family believe I was barely making rent. My craft business had been an early prototype for a carbon capture technology that I'd later sold for 8 figures, and not one of them had the slightest idea. I replied to my assistant, "We'll review tonight, prepare final documents." A sharp knock on the garage door jolted me back to my surroundings. "Maya," my cousin Vanessa called through the door. "Mom wants to know if you can help in the kitchen. The caterers need direction on the appetizers." Of course they did, because despite being the family disappointment, I was still expected to handle the thankless tasks no one else wanted. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Coming?" I called back, slipping my phone into my pocket. Back in the main house, organized chaos reigned. Children ran through sprinklers on the lawn while the adults clustered in status-conscious groups. The lakeside deck was reserved for the family success stories, my father and his business partners, cousins with impressive titles, aunts and uncles with vacation homes and country club memberships. The kitchen, meanwhile, was my mother's domain, and apparently now mine. "There you are," she said, barely glancing up from her tablet where she was checking off a catering list. "The servers need to know where to set up the raw bar, and your father wants someone to take his boat out to make sure it's running properly before everyone goes out tomorrow." I nodded, accepting the tasks without comment. This was my role at family gatherings, the reliable background character, useful, but forgettable. As I directed caterers and checked the boat's fuel levels, my cousin Patrick approached, his arm around a woman so perfectly put together she looked airbrushed. "Maya!" he exclaimed with exaggerated enthusiasm. "Meet Isabel. She's in finance." Isabel extended a manicured hand. "Patrick mentioned you work for a charity? That's so fulfilling." The condescension was as thick as the humidity. "It has its moments," I replied. "What area of finance?" "Private equity," she said, straightening slightly. "Blackstone. You probably wouldn't." "Excuse me," a deep voice interrupted. I turned to find Marcus Chen standing at the dock's edge, looking perfectly incongruous in tailored chinos and a casual button-down that probably cost more than my supposed monthly salary. My heart dropped to my stomach. Marcus was my COO at Eclipse, one of only 3 people who knew my real identity. What was he doing here? "I'm looking for Maya Vargas," he said, his eyes finding mine with immediate recognition. Patrick stepped forward, suddenly territorial. "And you are?" "Marcus? Chen?" he replied smoothly, extending a hand. "I'm here to see Maya about an urgent matter." "You're here to see Maya?" my mother asked, appearing suddenly at the dock's edge, confusion etching her features. Other family members began to gather, drawn by the unexpected arrival of a stranger, asking for the family's least remarkable member. Marcus smiled. "Yes, I need Ms. Vargas's signature on some important documents. They can't wait until Monday." My father pushed through the growing crowd, scotch still in hand. "What kind of documents would be so important they interrupt a family gathering? Maya just handles donations for that little charity." Marcus raised an eyebrow and looked at me, silently asking permission. The moment stretched between us. Years of hiding, of diminishing myself, of letting them believe I was less than I was. All of it balanced on this single decision. I gave him an almost imperceptible nod. "Actually," Marcus said, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent gathering, "I'm here because we need Ms. Vargas's approval on the Sanchez acquisition. It's a $2 billion deal that can't proceed without the CEO's signature." A collective gasp rippled through my family. My mother's tablet slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the wooden dock. CEO? My father repeated, his voice strangled. There must be some mistake. Marcus shook his head. No mistake, sir. Maya Vargas is the founder and CEO of Eclipse Ventures. I'm her chief operating officer. The silence that followed was absolute. Every eye turned to me, the cousin in the garage apartment, the niece who couldn't get it together, the daughter who was such a disappointment. Vanessa broke the silence with a sharp laugh. This is a joke, right? Maya runs errands for a nonprofit. I smoothed down my simple sundress and stepped forward. The Horizon Foundation is my personal charitable organization, Vanessa. I started it 3 years ago to distribute some of my company's profits. That's impossible, my father sputtered. You live in that tiny apartment. You drive a hybrid. You're wearing Target clothes right now. I met his gaze steadily. I choose how I live, Dad. It doesn't reflect what I can afford. My mother had collapsed into a deck chair, fanning herself with a cocktail napkin. Aunt Gloria was frantically searching for Maya Vargas on her phone, her eyes widening as search I. Results appeared. Eclipse Ventures. Sustainable technology. Valued at over $3 billion. She read aloud, her voice growing more incredulous with each word. My younger cousin Jamie, always on social media, gasped. Oh my God, you're... That Maya Vargas? The one Forbes called the invisible billionaire last month because you never do press? Marcus shifted uncomfortably, sensing the family tension. Perhaps I should have called ahead. I didn't realize you were in the middle of a family event. It's fine, I said, my voice finding a new steadiness. We can use my father's office to review the documents. Your father's office? My mother repeated faintly. But you're sleeping in the garage. And there it was, the absurdity laid bare. They had relegated the wealthiest person at the gathering to a pull-out couch in the garage while fighting over Lakeview bedrooms. Yes, I said simply. I am. As Marcus and I walked toward the house, whispers erupted behind us. I could feel the narrative of the entire family shifting, decades of judgment crumbling in minutes. In my father's wood-paneled office, Marcus closed the door behind us. I'm so sorry, Maya. I had no idea this was a secret from your family. When your assistant mentioned you were at your parents' lake house. It's okay, I said, surprising myself by how much I meant it. It was bound to happen eventually. He handed me the acquisition documents, which I reviewed carefully before signing. This wasn't just any deal. Sanchez Industries was a pioneer in affordable solar technology, and with our backing, their innovations would reach communities that had been priced out of renewable energy for decades. When we emerged from the office 30 minutes later, the entire family had regrouped in the great room, a tableau of shock, disbelief, and rapidly recalculating family dynamics. My father stepped forward first, his expression a complex mixture of confusion, embarrassment, and dawning opportunism. Maya, sweetheart, why didn't you tell us about your company? I met his gaze evenly. Would you have believed me if I had? The question hung in the air, answerable only with uncomfortable truths. We always knew you were smart, my mother interjected quickly. Just different from the others. More. Private. Different. Their code for less than, for disappointing. For not living up to the Vargas name in the ways that mattered to them. I should be going, Marcus said diplomatically. The jet is waiting at the regional airport. Jet? Patrick echoed weakly. Marcus nodded. Eclipse's corporate aircraft. Would you like a ride back to Detroit tonight, Maya? We could continue? Discussing the integration plan. Before I could answer, my mother rushed forward. But you can't leave. The reunion just started. We have the boat outing tomorrow and the family photo on Sunday. I looked around at the faces watching me, some calculating, some shocked, some already shifting into ingratiating smiles. For years, I'd accepted the garage apartment, the kitchen duties, the subtle digs, and condescension because fighting back would have meant revealing what I'd worked so hard to keep private. But now that the truth was out, I realized I didn't owe them my discomfort anymore. "I think I will head back tonight," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "Marcus, I'll get my bag from the garage." "The garage?" Aunt Gloria repeated, looking horrified. "Kathleen, you put her in the garage?" My mother flushed crimson. "We didn't know. How were we supposed to know?" "It doesn't matter what my bank account says," I said, addressing the room. "You put family in the garage because you decided their worth based on what you thought they contributed. That says everything about this family's values." I turned toward the door, then paused. "And for the record, my little apartment in Detroit is 4,000 square feet and was featured in Architectural Digest last spring. My sensible hybrid is one of only 7 prototypes in the world, developed by one of my portfolio companies. And these Target clothes are made by a sustainable fashion startup that I mentored through our incubator program." The silence was deafening. "I'll get my things," I said, and walked out, leaving them to absorb the new reality that the family disappointment had been anything but. In the garage, I quickly packed my duffel bag, taking one last look at the pull-out couch they'd deemed appropriate for me. A far cry from my actual bedroom at home with its custom king-size bed and smart glass windows overlooking the Detroit River. When I stepped outside, Marcus was waiting by a sleek black Escalade, having summoned a driver while I packed. Most of my family had spilled onto the driveway, watching in stunned silence. "Maya, wait," Vanessa called, hurrying forward in her impractical shoes. "We should talk about Blackwell and Associates' sustainability initiatives. Our firm has been looking for the right partner." I gave her a polite smile. "Have your managing partner call my office. We have a formal process for evaluating potential investments." "But we're family," she said, as if that trumped all business considerations. "Yes," I agreed. "We are." Which is exactly why everything needs to be above board and properly vetted. My father pushed forward next. "Sweetheart, this is all a misunderstanding. If we'd known about your success, of course we would have." "That's exactly the problem, Dad," I interrupted gently. "My worth to this family shouldn't be determined by my net worth." He flinched as if I'd slapped him. I turned to my mother, who was twisting her diamond tennis bracelet anxiously. "I won't be in the family photo this year. Maybe next time, if there's room for me in the main house." As Marcus held the car door open for me, my younger cousin Jamie broke away from the group and rushed forward. "Maya, wait. Can I just ask? Why? Why hide all this from everyone?" Her question was sincere, without the calculation I saw in the other's eyes. At 22, Jamie was still finding her way, much as I had been at her age. "Because I wanted to build something that was entirely mine," I told her honestly. "Not influenced by family expectations or judgments. Sometimes you need space to become who you really are." She nodded, understanding flickering in her eyes. "If you're ever in Detroit," I added, "call me. Not about money or connections, just to talk." As our car pulled away from the lake house, I watched my family grow smaller in the rearview mirror, a tableau of confusion, recalculation, and dawning regret. For the first time in years of family gatherings, I felt completely unburdened. Marcus glanced over at me. "Are you okay?" I considered the question carefully. Was I okay? I'd just shattered the careful facade I'd maintained for years. The controlled narrative of my life had just been blown wide open. "You know," I said slowly, "I think I am. Better than okay, actually." And it was true. As we drove toward the airport where the Eclipse corporate jet waited, I realized I was breathing more freely than I had in years. The weight of pretending to be less, of hiding my accomplishments, of accepting their judgment, It had all evaporated in a single moment of truth. Your family seemed surprised, Marcus observed diplomatically. I laughed. A real laugh, uninhibited and genuine. That's one word for it. As we boarded the plane, I kicked off my sandals and accepted a glass of champagne from the flight attendant. This was my real life, the one I'd built through intelligence, hard work, and vision. Not the diminished version I presented at family gatherings. To authenticity, I said, raising my glass. Marcus clinked his glass against mine. And to sleeping in real beds, not garage pullouts. We laughed together as the plane took off, leaving behind the lake house and all its complicated dynamics. My phone buzzed with notifications, family members finding my company website, my foundation's donor list, articles about Eclipse's market position. I turned it off. Their revelations could wait. I had $1 billion acquisition to finalize. And for the first time in my adult life, I was done hiding my light to make others comfortable with their shadows. As the Eclipse corporate jet soared through cloud-scattered skies toward Detroit, I scrolled through the barrage of texts and calls flooding my phone. Every Vargas family member who had my number, and several who must have begged for it from others, seemed desperate to reconnect with their suddenly valuable relative. 27 missed calls, I told Marcus, who was reviewing acquisition documents across the aisle. And 46 text messages. My cousin Patrick wants to grab coffee and catch up after 5 years of forgetting my birthday. Marcus smiled, knowingly. Amazing how success changes people's perception. Not my perception, I corrected. Their perception of me. That distinction had become my anchor over the years, understanding that others' judgments reflected their limitations. Not mine. It had taken therapy, meditation, and countless moments of self-affirmation to truly believe it. But now that belief was unshakable. The plane began its descent into Detroit, the city lights reflecting off the river like scattered diamonds. This was my chosen home, far from my family's expectations in Chicago's North Shore. Here, I'd built Eclipse Ventures from a one-room office with 3 employees into a powerhouse with global reach. The Sanchez integration team is prepped for Monday's meeting, Marcus said, closing his laptop. But honestly, after what just happened, maybe you should take the weekend off. I shook my head. Work has always been my sanctuary, not my burden. As we disembarked onto the private airfield, my driver Elena waited beside my sensible hybrid, actually, a prototype hydrogen-electric vehicle developed by one of our portfolio companies, valued at over $400,000 but deliberately understated in its design. "Welcome back, Ms. Vargas," Elena said, opening the door. "Home or office?" "Home," I decided. "But can we stop at Riverside Park first?" 30 minutes later, I stood at the riverfront, watching freighters navigate the dark waters. The Detroit skyline gleamed behind me, a city many had written off that was now reinventing itself through grit and vision, much like I had. My phone buzzed again. My mother's name flashed on the screen. After a deep breath, I answered. "Hello, Mom." "Maya," she began, her voice uncharacteristically tentative. "We need to talk about what happened today." "I think everything was said pretty clearly," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "You put me in the garage. My COO showed up. Now you know what I actually do for a living." "That's not fair," she protested. "How were we supposed to know you were so successful? You deliberately misled us." I watched a freighter's lights blink across the water. "I never lied about anything, Mom. I just didn't correct your assumptions." "But why?" Her voice cracked slightly. "Why let us think you were struggling when you were? When you had? When I had what? Money? Status? The things this family actually values?" The silence that followed was heavy with uncomfortable truth. "We're having an emergency family meeting tomorrow," she finally said. Everyone's cutting their trips short to come back to the lake house. We need to discuss the implications of your position. I almost laughed. The implications? Mom, I run a company. I'm not the heir to a throne. Your father thinks we should establish a family office to manage the Vargas investments. He's already called his wealth manager. Now I did laugh, the sound echoing across the empty riverfront. Mom, there are no Vargas investments. There's Eclipse Ventures, which is my company. And there's my foundation, which is my philanthropy. Dad doesn't get a family office. But we're family, she insisted, as if that single word, family, was a magical key that unlocked access to everything I'd built. Yes, I agreed. And families should respect boundaries. I need to go now. I have an early meeting tomorrow. On Saturday? Maya, this is more important than work. This changes everything for all of us. I closed my eyes briefly. That's the problem, Mom. It shouldn't change anything. I'm still the same person I was yesterday. The only difference is now, I sleep in the garage by choice, not necessity. I ended the call before she could respond and turned off my phone completely. The city lights reflected in the river, steadfast and undemanding. When I arrived home, to my supposedly tiny apartment that occupied the entire top floor of a restored, historic building, I kicked off my sandals and stood in my gallery-like living room. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed Detroit's skyline, while carefully curated art from local artists adorned walls that had indeed been featured in Architectural Digest. No pull-out couch, no fishing gear, no condescension, just space. My space. Designed for my comfort, not to impress others. I made a simple dinner, ate while reviewing financial projections, then fell asleep in my king-sized bed, more at peace than I'd felt in years. The truth, finally exposed, was strangely liberating. Saturday morning arrived with sunlight streaming through smart glass windows that had automatically adjusted their tint. I completed my usual routine: meditation, coffee on my terrace garden, a review of overnight communications from international partners. By 9, I was at Eclipse's headquarters in a restored Art Deco building downtown. Weekend security seemed surprised to see me. Ms. Vargas? Didn't expect you today. I smiled. Just catching up on some things, Carlos. I might have visitors. Later. Family. He nodded, understanding the weight of that simple word without needing details. In my office, a space designed for function rather than ego, with sustainable materials and practical furnishings, I dove into work, losing myself in the complex details of the Sanchez acquisition. This technology could revolutionize access to solar energy in developing regions. The impact estimates projected over 3 million households gaining electricity within 5 years. This was what mattered. Not family drama, not status games, not who slept where at a lake house. Around noon, my office phone rang, the private line few people had access to. Maya Vargas, I answered. Maya, it's Vanessa. Of course it was. Cousin Vanessa, who'd never once called me for anything other than a favor she needed. How did you get this number? I asked, genuinely curious. I may have contacted your foundation and said it was an urgent family matter, she admitted. Listen, I'm at your building's lobby. Security won't let me up without authorization. Can you tell them I'm approved? I closed my eyes briefly. Why are you here, Vanessa? We need to talk about Blackwell & Associates' potential partnership with Eclipse. I've brought our preliminary proposal. Of course she had, not even 24 hours after discovering. My position, she'd already prepared a proposal that would undoubtedly benefit her far more than it would Eclipse. Vanessa, there are proper channels for business development. Email our partnerships team on Monday. But we're family, she insisted, her voice taking on that entitled edge I knew so well. I thought we could discuss it over lunch. I made reservations at the Whitney. An expensive restaurant she probably expected me to pay for. The audacity was almost impressive. "I'm working," I said simply. And Eclipse doesn't fast-track proposals based on personal connections. It undermines our integrity. "You're really going to make me go through channels? After all the times I helped you?" Her voice had turned brittle. I almost asked what help she was referring to. The time she forgot to tell me about a family dinner? Or perhaps when she borrowed my economics textbook in college and returned it with coffee stains and missing pages. "Yes, I am," I said instead. "Have a good weekend, Vanessa." I hung up before she could respond and called building security. "Carlos? My cousin may be upset when she leaves. Please ensure she exits without issue." "Understood, Ms. Vargas." I returned to my work, but concentration proved elusive. The Vargas family dynamics, which I'd successfully compartmentalized for years, had now invaded my professional space, exactly what I'd feared would happen if they ever discovered the truth. By 3 o'clock, reports came that Vanessa had left after a heated exchange with security, and my father had called the company's public number 6 times, eventually leaving a message with the weekend receptionist about urgent family business. I instructed all staff to direct family calls to my assistant's voicemail until further notice. At 4, another call, this time from Jamie, my youngest cousin. "Maya, I'm so sorry to bother you at work," she began, her voice lacking the entitlement that characterized most Vargas communications. "I'm at the Riverwalk. I needed to get away from everyone for a bit." I softened despite myself. "Are you okay?" "Not really," she admitted. "Everyone's gone crazy since yesterday. Uncle Richard, your dad, has been on the phone with financial advisors all night. Aunt Gloria is telling everyone she always believed in you, and Mom is furious that Vanessa tried to see you without telling her." I sighed. "Sounds chaotic." "It's worse than that," Jamie continued. "They're talking about you like you're suddenly a different person. Like finding out you're successful somehow changes who you've always been." Her perception surprised me. At 22, Jamie showed more emotional intelligence than relatives twice her age. "Thank you for seeing that," I said quietly. "I have a question," she said after a pause. "And you can totally say no, but could I see it? Where you work?" "I'm studying environmental science, and everyone knows Eclipse is doing groundbreaking work in sustainable technology. I've actually cited your carbon capture initiatives in papers without having any idea you were, you know." I smiled, despite myself. "Behind them?" "Yeah. God, that's so embarrassing." I checked my watch. "I can give you a quick tour if you'd like. Are you alone?" "Completely. I told everyone I was going to the university library." "Text me when you arrive. I'll have security bring you up." 30 minutes later, Jamie stood in my office doorway, eyes wide as she took in the space. Unlike the rest of my relatives, she didn't look at the trappings of success, the awards, the view, the obvious indicators of status. Instead, her gaze went straight to the prototype models displayed along one wall. "Is that the Sunstream microgrid?" she asked, moving toward a scale model of our most promising rural electrification project. I nodded, surprised by her recognition. "You know, our projects? I've been following sustainable energy development since freshman year," she said, examining the model with genuine interest. "This design could revolutionize implementation in regions with unstable infrastructure." For the next hour, I gave Jamie a tour of our innovation lab, research facility, and development spaces. Her questions were thoughtful, specific, and demonstrated actual knowledge of the field, a stark contrast to Vanessa's superficial attempt at connection. "This is incredible," she said, as we finished in the main atrium, where a living wall of plants helped regulate the building's temperature. "Thank you for showing me." "You're welcome," I replied, realizing I meant it sincerely. "Now, can I Ask you something? What's really happening at the lake house? Jamie's expression clouded. Honestly, it's ugly. Everyone's calculating angles. Your dad keeps talking about leveraging family connections. Your mom is rewriting history about how she always supported your entrepreneurial spirit. And everyone else is trying to figure out how to benefit from being related to you. And what about you? I asked gently. What do you want from this? She looked surprised by the question. Nothing. I mean, getting to see eclipse was amazing, but I don't expect anything from you, Maya. I guess I wanted to understand. Understand what? How you did it. Built all this while letting everyone think you were struggling. Didn't it hurt? The way they treated you? The question hit with unexpected force. Had it hurt? Years of dismissal, condescension, garage apartments, and backhanded comments. Yes, I admitted. It hurt. But I learned something important. Their perception of me wasn't my reality, and protecting my vision was worth more than correcting their misconceptions. Jamie nodded slowly. I get that. I think I'm learning the same thing in my own way. We parted with a genuine hug, possibly the first authentic connection I'd had with a family member in years. As Saturday evening arrived, I declined 3 dinner invitations from suddenly solicitous relatives and instead ordered takeout from my favorite local Vietnamese restaurant. The owner, Mrs. Nguyen, knew nothing about my position at Eclipse. She just knew I loved her pho and always asked about her grandchildren. It was refreshing, being valued simply as a regular customer rather than a potential opportunity. Around 8, my phone rang again. My father. After a deep breath, I answered. Hello, Dad. Maya, he began, his business voice in full effect. We need to discuss the family's involvement in your company. No greeting, no apology for the garage apartment, just straight to his perceived entitlement. There is no family involvement in my company, I replied evenly. Don't be ridiculous. We're Vargases. Family businesses are our legacy. I almost laughed. My grandfather had owned a successful chain of hardware stores, which my father had expanded into a regional empire before a leveraged buyout in the early 2000s. He'd been living off those proceeds ever since, calling himself a strategic investor, while mainly playing golf and collecting rare whiskeys. Eclipse isn't a family business, Dad. It's my business. I founded it, I built it, I run it. With family connections, he insisted. Our name opened doors for you. This time, I did laugh. I don't use Vargas in business contexts. I haven't since graduate school. Silence followed this revelation. Then, what do you mean you don't use our name? Professionally, I'm MJ Vargas. Most people don't even know what the M stands for. I've never leveraged the Vargas reputation because I wanted to succeed or fail on my own merits. That's ridiculous, he sputtered. Why would you hide your connection to us? I closed my eyes, summoning patience. I didn't hide it. I just didn't lead with it. And given how quickly you're trying to claim ownership of my success, I'd say that decision was validated. Now, listen here, he began, his voice taking on the authoritative tone that had intimidated me as a child, but now just sounded hollow. I'm still your father. Yes, I agreed. You are. And as my father, I would have expected you to be proud of what I've built, not immediately trying to control it. We're having a family meeting tomorrow at noon, he stated, ignoring my point entirely. As the Vargas patriarch, I expect you to be there. The old Maya would have acquiesced, swallowing her objections to keep the peace. But I wasn't that person anymore. Hadn't been for years, though they hadn't noticed. I have prior commitments, I said calmly. More important than family, he demanded. More important than being told how my company should be run by people who put me in the garage, I confirmed. I ended the call and turned back to my work, but concentration proved impossible. Despite years of therapy and personal growth, their voices still found ways to burrow under my skin. Around midnight, I found myself on my terrace garden, gazing at the city lights while nursing a glass of wine. Detroit spread before me, a city of resilience, reinvention, and unexpected beauty. Much like its residents, it had been underestimated, written off, and yet continued to rise. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Heads up, your family has been calling board members. 3 so far." I closed my eyes, feeling a familiar knot of tension form between my shoulders. This was exactly why I'd kept my success private. The Vargas family didn't understand boundaries, never had. "How bad?" I texted back. "Caleb Winters said your father offered him substantial family investment if he'd arrange a special board meeting. Caleb was our lead investor and board chair, a shrewd venture capitalist who had backed Eclipse from its earliest days. He was also fiercely ethical and protective of founder-led companies." "His response?" I asked. "He suggested your father review Eclipse's corporate governance documents, which apparently led to some colorful language." Despite everything, I smiled. Caleb wouldn't be swayed by blustering patriarchs or promises of family money. None of my carefully selected board would be. "Thanks for the warning," I replied. "We'll address it Monday." I set my phone down and took another sip of wine. The city hummed below, oblivious to family drama and power plays. People lived their lives, pursued their dreams, faced their challenges, all without needing to announce their worth or justify their choices. Tomorrow would bring more calls, more demands, more attempts to insert themselves into what I'd built. But tonight, I had this moment of peace, this view, this life I'd created on my own terms. My phone lit up again, a text from Jamie. "They're planning an ambush, coming to your office tomorrow. Thought you should know." I smiled at her loyalty, so unexpected and yet so welcome. "Thank you," I texted back. "Get some rest." Then I sent a message to building security, instructing them on tomorrow's protocols. Eclipse headquarters would be locked down to unauthorized visitors with explicit instructions regarding the Vargas family. As Sunday morning dawned, I prepared for the inevitable confrontation. Not by rehearsing arguments or fortifying defenses, but by centering myself in the truth of who I was and what I'd built. After meditation and breakfast, I drove to Eclipse, arriving just as Marcus pulled in. "You don't have to be here today," I told him as we walked toward the entrance. He shrugged. "Family ambushes are more manageable with allies present." Inside, I briefed security again, ensuring they understood that no Vargas family members were to be admitted without my explicit approval, regardless of what they claimed about urgency or family connections. "What's our play here?" Marcus asked as we settled in my office. I considered the question carefully. Boundaries. Clear, firm, unapologetic boundaries. He nodded, understanding exactly what I meant. In business, boundaries were essential. The difference between strategic partnerships and exploitative relationships. With family, they were even more critical, though often harder to maintain. At precisely noon, the time of the family meeting I'd been commanded to attend, the first call came from the lobby. "Ms. Vargas, your parents and several relatives are here requesting access. They're saying it's a family emergency." I exchanged glances with Marcus. "Is anyone injured or in medical distress?" "No, ma'am. They appear to be in business attire. Your father is insisting it's about family business matters that can't wait. Please inform them that I'm unavailable and suggest they email my assistant for a proper appointment." 20 minutes later, security called again. "They're refusing to leave, Ms. Vargas. Your father is threatening to call board members from the lobby." I sighed. "I'll come down." In the marble-floored lobby of Eclipse headquarters, the Vargas contingent had assembled like an invasion force. My parents, Vanessa and her husband, 2 uncles, and Aunt Gloria. All dressed as if for a corporate takeover, expressions ranging from determination to self-righteousness. Maya, my father began, stepping forward with the confidence of someone who expected the world to bend to his will. This has gone far enough. We're family, and family doesn't shut family out. I remained by the security desk, maintaining physical and emotional distance. I'm not shutting anyone out. I'm maintaining appropriate boundaries between my personal and professional life. Boundaries? My mother echoed incredulously. We're your parents. Yes, I agreed. And this is my company. Those are separate relationships that require separate approaches. My father's face reddened. I've spoken with several board members. No, I interrupted firmly. You've attempted to contact board members who appropriately referred you back to me. Dad, what exactly do you hope to accomplish here? The directness of the question seemed to catch him off guard. For a moment, the bluster faltered. Vanessa stepped into the gap. We're here to discuss how Eclipse can partner with family interests. I've prepared a comprehensive proposal for Blackwell & Associates Environmental Division to… Stop, I said quietly but firmly. This isn't how business works at Eclipse. We don't make decisions based on family connections or ambushes on Sunday afternoons. But my mother began. Family, I finished for her. Yes, you've made that abundantly clear. What's less clear is why you think that entitles you to circumvent proper business protocols or professional boundaries. I looked at each of them in turn. These people who had relegated me to garage apartments and condescending comments for years, now standing in my lobby expecting access to what I'd built. Here's what's going to happen, I continued, my voice calm but firm. Everyone is going to leave now. If you have legitimate business proposals, you can submit them through proper channels, just like anyone else. If you want to have a family conversation, we can schedule that separately, at a neutral location, not my place of business. This is ridiculous, my father sputtered. We're trying to help you. I met his gaze steadily. No, Dad. You're trying to help yourselves to what I've built. There's a difference. The truth of it hung in the air between us, too accurate to deny, yet too uncomfortable to acknowledge. After a tense silence, my mother stepped forward, her expression softening into the conciliatory look she used when shifting tactics. Sweetheart, we're just proud of you. We want to be part of your success. Then be proud from an appropriate distance, I replied. Respect my boundaries, submit proposals through proper channels, and perhaps consider why I felt the need to keep my success private from my own family for so many years. I turned to security. Please escort my family out. They're welcome to call my personal number later if they'd like to have a family conversation that doesn't involve business proposals or takeover attempts. As they were led toward the doors, my father turned back. This isn't over, Maya. I nodded once. I know, but how it continues is up to you. Watching them leave, these people whose approval I'd once desperately sought, I felt not triumph or vindication, but a quiet certainty. The girl who would have done anything to earn their respect had grown into a woman who no longer needed it. And that was perhaps the most valuable asset I'd ever developed. The Monday morning executive briefing at Eclipse headquarters had a different energy than usual. News travels fast in corporate circles, and whispers of the Vargas family showdown had already rippled through the company. As I took my seat at the head of the conference table, I could feel curious glances from my leadership team. People who had known me for years, but were perhaps seeing me in a new light. Let's address the elephant in the room, I said, meeting their gazes directly. Yes, my family discovered my position at Eclipse this weekend. No, it doesn't change anything about our operations or leadership structure. Marcus nodded approvingly from his seat to my right. However, I continued, there may be attempts by various Vargas family members to leverage perceived connections for business advantages. All such approaches should be directed to our standard evaluation processes with no special treatment. Heads nodded around the table. Eclipse had built its reputation on integrity and merit-based decisions, values I'd established from day one. Now, let's discuss the Sanchez integration. For the next 2 hours, we delved into acquisition timelines, technology integration, plans, and market positioning strategies. This was my element: clear objectives, strategic thinking, measurable outcomes. No family drama, no emotional manipulation, just the clean satisfaction of building something meaningful. As the meeting concluded, Diane from legal lingered behind. "I should mention," she said carefully, "that your father left 3 messages with my assistant this morning asking about family provisions in the corporate structure." I sighed. "Let me guess. He wanted to know if there were special shareholder arrangements for family members." She nodded. "Something like that." I didn't respond, of course. "Thank you. If he calls again, please refer him to me directly." After she left, I remained at the conference table, staring at the sprawling Detroit skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. The city had taught me valuable lessons about resilience and authenticity. Detroit didn't pretend to be something. It wasn't. It owned its industrial past while forging a new identity, much as I had done. My contemplation was interrupted by my assistant, Sophie. "Your mother's in the lobby. She's alone and says it's personal, not business." I checked my watch. Barely. Noon, and the family incursions had already begun. "Give me 5 minutes, then send her up." When my mother entered my office, her eyes widened as she took in the space. Not ostentatious by CEO standards, but certainly a far cry from the struggling, nonprofit worker's office she'd imagined. African artwork adorned one wall, pieces from countries where Eclipse had implemented sustainable energy projects. Awards and recognition plaques occupied minimal shelf space. The focus was on function, not ego. "Maya," she began, her voice softer than yesterday's confrontational tone. She'd exchanged her designer suit for a more casual outfit, though still perfectly coordinated. "This is impressive." "Thank you," I replied simply, gesturing to a chair across from my desk. "What can I do for you, Mom?" She settled primly on the edge of the seat. "I wanted to see where you work, to understand this part of your life that you've kept hidden from us." I noted her phrasing, that I had hidden something from them, not that they had failed to see what was right in front of them. "What do you want to understand?" I asked. She gestured vaguely around the office. "All of this. How you built it. Why you didn't tell us." I considered my response carefully. Eclipse began with an idea about democratizing sustainable technology, making clean energy accessible to communities traditionally left behind. I started small, with angel funding and a 3-person team. "But why not tell us? We would have been so proud." I met her gaze steadily. "Would you? When I graduated?" With my MBA, Dad called it a waste of potential because I wanted to work in sustainability instead of traditional finance. She flinched slightly. "That was years ago. People change." "Do they?" I asked quietly. "Or do they just adapt to changing circumstances while maintaining the same fundamental values?" My mother smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her pants. "Your father is struggling with this, you know. Finding out his daughter is a... What did that magazine call you? A visionary business leader? And how is he struggling exactly? With pride? Or with the realization that he completely misjudged me for years?" Her expression tightened. "That's unfair, Maya. We always supported you." "Did you? When was the last time either of you asked about my work without dismissing?" "It? When did you ever show interest in what I was building rather than when I would get a real job or settle down?" "We didn't know." "You didn't ask," I corrected gently. "There's a difference." She fell silent, perhaps truly hearing me for the first time in years. "The night before I secured our first major funding round," I continued, "I called Dad for advice. He told me to stop playing entrepreneur and apply for a management position at his friend's company. That was the last time I shared any aspect of Eclipse with either of you. My mother's eyes glistened with unexpected tears. I didn't know that. Of course not. Because after years of dismissal, I stopped offering pieces of myself only to have them devalued. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue from her purse. Is that why you let us believe you were less successful than you are? To punish us? The question revealed so much about her perspective. In her world, my choices could only be understood as reactions to them, not independent decisions, based on my own values. No, Mom. I let you believe what you wanted to believe because correcting you wasn't worth the emotional cost. I built a life that brings me fulfillment and purpose. I didn't need your validation to know its value. She looked around the office again, seeing it with new eyes. And all this time, when we thought you were struggling, I was thriving, I finished for her. Just not in ways you recognized or valued. A moment of silence stretched between us, not comfortable, but perhaps more honest than any conversation we'd had in years. Your father wants to meet with you, she finally said. To apologize. I raised an eyebrow skeptically. Does he? Or does he want to propose another family? Business integration? Her gaze dropped to her hands. Both, perhaps. He's complicated, Maya. Finding out about your success was jarring for him. I imagine it was, I acknowledged. It's not easy to reconcile years of dismissive judgment with the reality that the person you underestimated has built something significant. Will you meet with him? I considered the question carefully. Yes, but not here. Not at the lake house either. Neutral ground, just the three of us. No business proposals, no family office discussions, just honest conversation. Relief softened her features. Thank you. That's all I came to ask. As she stood to leave, she paused, looking at a framed photo on my credenza, one taken at the opening of our first solar installation in rural Kenya. I stood among community members, all of us smiling as lights came on in the village school for the first time. You look happy there, she observed, fulfilled. I was. I am. She nodded slowly. I'd like to hear about that project sometime, if you're willing to share. It was a small opening, tentative and perhaps temporary, but an opening nonetheless. Maybe I will, I said, surprised to find I meant it. After she left, I texted Marcus. Phase 1 of the Vargas reconciliation attempt complete. Mother actually asked about my work without mentioning marriage prospects or biological clocks. He responded with a laughing emoji and progress. The rest of Monday passed in a blur of meetings, decisions, and the normal rhythm of running a global company. By evening, I was reviewing quarterly projections when Sophie appeared in my doorway. There's someone else here to see you. Jamie Vargas? She says she's your cousin. I smiled, genuinely pleased. Send her in. Jamie entered hesitantly, backpack slung over one shoulder. Is this a bad time? I can come back if you're busy. Not at all, I assured her, gesturing to a chair. What brings you by? She dropped her backpack and sank into the chair. Honestly? Escape. The lake house is still a war zone. Your mom came back from seeing you and got into a huge fight with my mom about approaching Maya correctly. Then Uncle Richard started lecturing everyone about family unity, while simultaneously calling his lawyer about something called bloodline shares. I couldn't help laughing. That's not actually a thing. I figured. She grinned. Anyway, I had a sustainability seminar on campus today and thought I'd see if you were free. I can go if you're working. I'm always working, I admitted, but I could use a break. Have you eaten? 20 minutes later, we were seated at Harmony Kitchen, a small farm-to-table restaurant a few blocks from Eclipse. The owner, Layla, greeted me by name and led us to my usual corner table. "You come here often?" Jamie asked as we settled in. "At least once a week. Layla sources everything locally and runs a culinary training program for formerly incarcerated individuals. Eclipse was an early investor." Jamie studied me curiously. "You really care about this stuff, don't you? It's not just business for you." "It never has been," I confirmed. "Financial success is a means to an end, not the end itself." As we ate, Jamie shared her environmental studies projects and her frustrations with family expectations. As the youngest cousin, she'd grown up in the shadow of successful relatives like Vanessa, constantly compared and found wanting. "I get it," I told her. "The Vargas measuring stick has always been wealth and status, not impact or purpose." She nodded eagerly. "Exactly. When I said I wanted to study environmental science, my mom asked why I wouldn't choose something practical, like law or business. And yet here we are," I observed, "in a world where environmental expertise is desperately needed for survival, while the market is saturated with lawyers and MBAs. "Tell that to the family," she sighed. I studied her thoughtfully. "Jamie, can I offer some advice? Not as your successful cousin, but as someone who's walked a similar path?" She leaned forward eagerly. "Please, stop seeking their validation. It's a moving target designed to keep you chasing approval that never fully arrives." Her expression fell slightly. "That's easier said than done." "I know," I acknowledged. "It took me years. But here's what I learned. The moment I stopped measuring my worth by their metrics, I found freedom to pursue what actually mattered to me." "And look where it got you," she said, gesturing around as if my success was self-evident. I shook my head. "That's not the point. I didn't build Eclipse to prove them wrong or win their approval. I built it because I believed in the vision. The success followed the purpose, not the other way around." She considered this, pushing food around her plate. "How did you do it? Just stop caring what they thought?" "I didn't stop caring entirely," I admitted. "I just stopped giving their opinions power over my choices. I asked myself, if no one in my family ever approved, would this still be worth doing? The answer was always yes." "That's actually really helpful," she said quietly. "Start small," I suggested. "Set one boundary. Make one decision based solely on your values, not family expectations. Then another. It gets easier with practice." As we finished dinner, Jamie seemed lighter somehow, as if our conversation had unburdened her in some small way. When I paid the bill, she didn't protest or make awkward offers to contribute, another refreshing departure from the usual Vargas power dynamics around money. "Thanks for this," she said as we walked back toward Eclipse. "Not just dinner, but everything." "Anytime," I replied, surprised to find I genuinely meant it. Back at my office, I found several more messages from family members. My father demanding a meeting on his terms, Vanessa persisting with her partnership proposal, and Uncle suddenly interested in investing in Eclipse. I forwarded them all to my personal assistant with instructions to schedule nothing until after my neutral ground meeting with my parents. Tuesday morning brought the planned sit-down with my father at a quiet cafe halfway between Eclipse and the lake house. I arrived 15 minutes early to center myself, selecting a corner table with a view of both the entrance and the street. My parents arrived exactly on time, my father's posture stiff with unaccustomed awkwardness. He'd always entered rooms with the confidence of someone who expected deference. Now, scanning the cafe for me, he seemed almost vulnerable. "Maya," he greeted as they approached the table. No hug, but no immediate business pitch either. Progress of a sort. "Dad, Mom, thank you for meeting here." They settled across from me, ordering coffee when the server approached. An uncomfortable silence fell until our drinks arrived. Finally, my father cleared his throat. I owe you an apology. The words were so unexpected that for a moment I wasn't sure I'd heard correctly. For the garage, he continued, and for underestimating you. It was wrong. I studied him carefully, searching for the manipulative angle, the hidden agenda behind the apology. But his expression held something I rarely associated with Richard Vargas: genuine regret. Thank you, I said simply. I appreciate that. He nodded, then straightened slightly. I've been thinking about what you said, about boundaries. And you're right. I approached this all wrong. Finding out about Eclipse was a shock. I reacted badly. We both did, my mother added. Why was it such a shock? I asked, genuinely curious. I've never hidden my interest in sustainable technology or my business acumen. Did you really think I was just answering phones? All these years? My father looked uncomfortable. We thought you were drifting, finding yourself. At 32, I couldn't help the incredulity in my voice. Your path wasn't traditional, my mother said defensively. When you left law school. I completed law school, I corrected. I chose not to practice because I saw greater potential for impact in green technology. My father sighed. That's exactly it, Maya. In our world, my world, success has a specific look. Corporate law, finance, visible wealth, country club memberships. When you rejected those markers, I assumed you were rejecting success itself. It was perhaps the most honest thing he'd ever said to me. I rejected your definition of success, I clarified, not success itself. He nodded slowly. I see that now, and I'm proud of what you've built, truly. The words I'd once longed to hear now washed over me with surprising hollowness. I'd outgrown the need for his approval somewhere along the way. Thank you, I said anyway, because his effort deserved acknowledgement. I'd like to know more, my mother ventured. About Eclipse, what you've built, if you're willing to share. So I did. For the next hour, I told them about Eclipse's beginnings, our mission, our growth. I shared stories of installations in communities transformed by accessible clean energy, of technologies developed by brilliant minds who needed only opportunity and resources to create world-changing innovations. They listened, really listened, perhaps for the first time in years. It's extraordinary, my father said finally. What you've accomplished. Thank you. He hesitated. Then, I don't suppose. That is, I wonder if there might be a place for family involvement in some capacity. Not controlling, he added quickly, seeing my expression, but supportive, perhaps advisory. And there it was, the agenda beneath the apology, not as blatant as before, more carefully framed, but still, fundamentally about access to what I'd built. Dad, I said gently, Eclipse has a fully staffed advisory board of industry experts and community representatives. What specific expertise would you bring to sustainable technology? He blinked, clearly not having anticipated the question. Well, general business acumen. Connections. Eclipse doesn't operate on connections, I explained. We succeed through innovation, integrity, and impact measurement. Our advisors bring specific technical knowledge or community insights. I see, he said stiffly. That doesn't mean we can't have a relationship, I continued. Just not a business one. You're my parents. That's valuable in itself, isn't it? My mother reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Of course it is, Maya. We're just adjusting. My father nodded, though his expression remained complicated. It's difficult to separate business from personal in our family. It always has been. I know, I acknowledged. But maybe that's been part of the problem all along. As we prepared to leave, My father hesitated, then asked, "Will you come to dinner on Friday?" "Just us at the house. No garage apartment," he added, with an attempt at humor that fell slightly flat. I considered the invitation. Yes, but I'd like to bring someone, Jamie. She could use some family support for her environmental studies. My mother looked surprised. "Jamie? But she's brilliant," I finished firmly, "and passionate about her field, the same way I was at her age." Understanding dawned in my mother's eyes. "Of course, we'd love to have her." As they left, my father turned back. "Maya, for what it's worth, I really am proud of you, not because of what you've built, but because of how you built it. On your terms." The words settled something within me, not because I needed his approval, but because they suggested that perhaps, in some small way, he was beginning to understand. The rest of the week flowed in its normal rhythm of meetings, decisions, and forward momentum. Eclipse announced the Sanchez acquisition to positive market response. Our stock rose 8%. 3 new municipalities signed agreements to implement our microgrid technology in underserved neighborhoods. By Friday evening, as I drove to my parents' house with Jamie beside me, I felt a strange sense of closure approaching. Not the fairy tale reconciliation of family movies, but something more nuanced, a renegotiation of boundaries and expectations based on who we actually were, not who we had expected each other to be. "Nervous?" Jamie asked as we pulled into the driveway. I considered the question. Not nervous, just aware of old patterns and the effort it takes to create new ones. She nodded with surprising wisdom for her age. "I've been thinking about what you said, about setting boundaries and making choices based on my values." "And?" She smiled. "I dropped my business minor and added environmental justice instead. Mom had a complete meltdown, but it felt right." I grinned. "Proud of you." My mother opened the door before we could knock, welcoming us with a warmth that seemed only slightly rehearsed. The house smelled of her signature beef bourguignon, a dish reserved for honored guests, not family disappointments. My father greeted us in the living room, offering drinks with the careful courtesy usually reserved for business associates. The garage apartment went unmentioned. As we settled into dinner, conversation flowed with surprising ease. My parents asked thoughtful questions about Eclipse's recent projects. Jamie shared her environmental justice research and received actual interest rather than dismissal. "Maya mentioned you might intern this summer," my father said to Jamie. "Environmental policy work?" Jamie glanced at me in surprise. I hadn't mentioned any such thing. "Eclipse has an environmental policy division," I explained. "They work with lawmakers on clean energy legislation. If you're interested, I could connect you with the director." "That would be amazing," Jamie breathed. "Merit-based, of course," I added with a meaningful look. "No special treatment for family." She nodded firmly. "I wouldn't want it any other way." My father studied us both with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You know," he said finally, "watching you two reminds me of something important I'd forgotten." "What's that?" my mother asked. "That success isn't inherited," he said thoughtfully. "It's earned, and it looks different for each generation." I met his gaze, surprised by the insight. "That's remarkably accurate, Dad." He smiled slightly. "Even old dogs can learn new perspectives, Maya." As dinner concluded, my mother brought out photo albums, a move I might once have dreaded but now viewed with amused tolerance. She flipped to a picture of me at 10 years old, proudly displaying a science fair project on solar energy. "You always knew your path, didn't you?" she mused. "Even then, we just weren't listening." "I knew what interested me," I corrected gently. The path revealed itself one step at a time. My father studied the photograph. "I remember this. You won first place, and instead of celebrating, I asked why you hadn't chosen a more practical project. Like Vanessa's business plan for a neighborhood lemonade stand franchise, I recalled with a laugh. He winced. Not my finest parenting moment. No, I agreed. But here's what matters now. Are you listening today? He met my gaze. Directly, I'm trying to, truly. And perhaps that was all anyone could really ask for. The willingness to try, to see beyond established narratives, to recognize the value in paths different from our own. As Jamie and I prepared to leave, my mother handed me a small package. For your office, she said, if you want it. Inside was a framed photo, not a family portrait or a forced vacation smile, but a newspaper clipping from my high school graduation. I'd won a national science scholarship, and there I stood, beaming with genuine pride, my future still unwritten. Thank you, I said, surprisingly touched. I'll find a place for it. In the car, Jamie turned to me. That was not what I expected. Me neither, I admitted. Do you think they've really changed? I considered the question carefully. People rarely change completely, but perspectives can shift and relationships can be renegotiated. That's what tonight was about. She nodded thoughtfully. So what happens next? With the family, I mean. We maintain boundaries. We build relationships based on who we actually are, not who they expected us to be. And we remember that our worth isn't determined by their approval. That's it? No dramatic reconciliation? No, and they never underestimated me again? I laughed. Life isn't a movie script, Jamie. Real change is incremental, imperfect, and ongoing. The happy ending isn't them finally seeing my value. It's me no longer needing them to. As we drove through the quiet streets toward Detroit, the city lights welcomed us back, a skyline being reimagined day by day, much like the relationships we choose to rebuild, the boundaries we learn to maintain, and the definitions of success we dare to rewrite. 3 months after the garage apartment revelation, I stood at the podium of Detroit's renovated Symphony Hall, surveying a room filled with the city's business leaders, community advocates, politicians, and changemakers. The annual Impact Innovation Awards had become a prestigious recognition of those driving positive change through sustainable business practices. 5 years ago, I began, my voice carrying through the historic space. Eclipse Ventures was a 4-person team working out of a converted warehouse, powered by a vision that sustainable technology could transform communities left behind by traditional development. Today, I'm honored to announce that our microgrid installations have brought reliable, clean energy to over 2 million people worldwide. Applause rippled through the audience. From my vantage point, I could see Marcus and my executive team at their table near the front, alongside community partners and foundation leaders. And there, somewhat surprisingly, sat my parents and Jamie at a table I'd arranged for them, not front and center, but present nonetheless. But tonight isn't about Eclipse, I continued. It's about celebrating all the innovators in this room who understand that true success is measured not just in profit margins, but in lives improved, communities empowered, and resources preserved for future generations. As I introduced the award categories and honorees, I reflected on how much had changed in 3 months, not just in my family dynamics, but in my own relationship with the truth of who I was and what I'd built. The night concluded with Eclipse receiving the Transformative Impact Award, recognizing our work bringing affordable clean energy to underserved urban and rural communities. As I accepted the glass sculpture, I caught my father's eye in the audience. He nodded once, a gesture containing more genuine respect than all the effusive praise he'd attempted in recent months. At the reception afterward, I navigated between conversations with community partners, political allies, and fellow entrepreneurs. Detroit's renaissance was being driven by a new generation of leaders committed to inclusive growth and sustainable development, a vision Eclipse had championed from its inception. Ms. Vargas. A voice interrupted my conversation with the city's sustainability director. I turned to find Vanessa approaching, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "Do you have a moment?" I excused myself and stepped aside with her. "I'm surprised to see you here, Vanessa. I didn't know you were in town." She adjusted her designer clutch nervously. "I flew in this morning. I needed to speak with you." 3 months ago, after the family confrontation at Eclipse headquarters, Vanessa had been among the most aggrieved by my boundary setting. Her partnership proposal had been rejected through proper channels, not because of our relationship, but because it lacked substantive merit and environmental commitment. "I'm listening," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "I lost my position at Blackwell," she said without preamble. "The partnership track. It's not happening." I hadn't expected this. "I'm sorry to hear that." Her laugh held little humor. "Are you? After how I treated you for years?" "Professional setbacks are difficult, regardless of personal history," I said carefully. She nodded, accepting this measured response. "The thing is, after our proposal was rejected, I actually read the feedback from your evaluation team. Really, read it, not just the rejection itself. This surprised me. Eclipse provided detailed assessment of all partnership proposals, but most rejected parties focused only on the negative outcome, not the constructive insights." "And?" I prompted. "They were right," she admitted, the words seeming to cost her. "Our environmental division was window dressing. The metrics were manipulated. The commitment wasn't real." Her candor was unexpected. That took courage to acknowledge. "Not as much courage as building something authentic from the ground up," she countered. "Like you did." The conversation was veering into territory I hadn't anticipated. Genuine reflection rather than strategic repositioning. "What will you do now?" I asked. She took a deep breath. "I'm starting over. I've accepted a position with a smaller firm specializing in environmental compliance law. Lower title, less prestige, but..." She hesitated. "Real work. Meaningful." "Work. That's impressive, Vanessa. Truly." She smiled slightly. "I've spent my career chasing validation through titles and status. Watching you these past months, how you've handled the family, maintained your boundaries, stayed true to your mission despite pressure, it's been educational." Before I could respond, the mayor approached to congratulate me, and Vanessa gracefully stepped away. But her words lingered. The idea that my choices might influence others in my family to reconsider their own paths was something I'd never anticipated. Later that evening, as the event wound down, I found my parents waiting near the coat check. My mother embraced me, warmly, while my father stood with uncharacteristic hesitation. "That was quite something," he said finally. "Seeing you in your element, the respect people have for you and your work." "Thank you for coming," I replied, meaning it. Their presence hadn't been necessary for my validation, but their willingness to step into my world rather than demanding I conform to theirs represented meaningful progress. "We're having brunch tomorrow before heading back," my mother said. "Nothing formal, just at the house. Jamie will be there. Perhaps you could join us? If you're not too busy," she added hastily, a new awareness of my professional commitments evident in her tone. "I'd like that," I said, surprising myself with how true it felt. The following morning, I arrived at my parents' downtown Detroit condominium, their recent purchase, ostensibly to spend more time in the city, though we all understood it as an attempt to be closer to my world. The garage apartment at the lake house remained unmentioned, a silent acknowledgement of past misjudgments. Jamie greeted me with a genuine hug. "The awards were amazing. Your speech made me tear up a little." "Don't tell anyone," I stage whispered. "I have a reputation for ruthless business acumen to maintain." She laughed, her ease around me a welcome change from the family's previous nervous deference or calculated positioning. Brunch was surprisingly pleasant, conversation flowing naturally between discussions of Eclipse's recent projects, Jamie's environmental justice research, and local Detroit developments. My parents asked thoughtful questions and actually listened to the answers, a skill they seemed to be consciously developing. As we finished our coffee on the balcony overlooking the river, my father cleared his throat. "Maya, there's something I'd like to discuss with you. Not about Eclipse," he added quickly, seeing my expression. "Something more personal." My mother and Jamie exchanged glances and discreetly moved inside, leaving us alone with the panoramic view of the city I'd chosen to make my home. "I've been doing a lot of thinking these past months," he began, uncharacteristically hesitant. "About success, legacy, the values I've prioritized throughout my life." I waited, curious where this was heading. "The hardware store chain your grandfather built, the business I expanded, it was never really about the products we sold. It was about helping people build things that mattered to them. Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of that purpose and focused only on growth and status." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Watching you lead Eclipse, seeing how you've maintained your vision despite success and growth. It's forced me to reconsider many things." "Such as?" I prompted gently. "Such as what I want my remaining years to mean," he said simply. "I've decided to redirect most of my investment portfolio toward impact-focused ventures. Not through Eclipse," I smiled. "Evolution on multiple fronts." "Speaking of evolution," he said, "the board approved your proposal for the Leadership Institute. Full funding starting next quarter." The Eclipse Leadership Institute had been my vision for years, a program to identify and develop diverse talent in sustainable technology, focusing particularly on communities underrepresented in the sector. Not just scholarships or internships, but comprehensive support including mentorship, skill development, and pathways to meaningful careers or entrepreneurship. "That's excellent news," I said, already envisioning the possibilities. "We'll need to move quickly on the community partnerships." "Already in progress," he assured me. "The team is extraordinary." As the evening progressed, I took the stage to address the gathering. Employees, partners, and families who had contributed to Eclipse's mission in various ways. "When we talk about impact," I began, "we often focus on measurable outcomes: kilowatts generated, emissions reduced, communities served. Those metrics matter enormously. But tonight, I want to talk about a different kind of impact: the ripple effects of choosing authenticity and purpose over external expectations." From my vantage point, I could see Jamie listening intently, alongside my parents and other family members who had made the journey to Detroit for this event, no longer dismissive of my work, but not centered in my professional identity either. A healthier balance had gradually emerged. Each of us faces moments where the path of least resistance would be to shrink our ambitions, to conform to others' limited vision of who we are or what we can achieve. Those moments test not just our courage, but our clarity about what truly matters. The crowd had grown quiet, listening with unexpected intensity. At Eclipse, we've always believed that sustainable technology can transform communities. But sustainability isn't just about energy systems or resource management. It's about creating systems, businesses, relationships, communities that can thrive authentically over time without depleting the human spirit. I caught my father's eye in the audience. He nodded slightly, perhaps recognizing his own recent evolution in my words. "When we choose authentic purpose over external validation, we create space for others to do the same. That's a different kind of renewable energy, the kind that fuels innovation, courage, and meaningful change." As the gathering concluded, Jamie approached with unexpected news. "I've been offered a part-time position with the city's Environmental Justice Initiative while I complete my degree," she announced proudly. "It's perfect preparation for Georgetown next year." That's wonderful, I replied. Your own path, on your own terms. She grinned. I may have mentioned your name once or twice during the interview. The Vargas connection finally proving useful? I teased. Not the Vargas name, she corrected. Your specific reputation for integrity and impact. Big difference. Her distinction warmed me more than any family acknowledgement had in years. As the crowd dispersed, I found myself walking along the Detroit Riverwalk with my parents in comfortable silence. The city lights reflected on the water, a fitting metaphor for the way truth, once revealed, continued to illuminate perspectives long after the initial revelation. I owe you an apology, my father said suddenly, breaking the quiet. Not just for the garage apartment, but for something more fundamental. I waited, curious. I measured your worth by how well you conformed to my definition of success. Continued. That was profoundly wrong, and I'm sorry. The words weren't dramatic or emotional, but from Richard Vargas, a man who had built his identity on being right, they represented something close to a transformation. Thank you, I said simply. That means a lot. My mother took my hand. Her usual polish softened by genuine emotion. We're learning, Maya. It's not always graceful, but we're trying. That's all anyone can ask, I acknowledged. Later that night, alone in my loft overlooking the city I'd chosen as home, I reflected on the journey of the past 6 months. The garage apartment revelation hadn't just changed my family's perception of me. It had crystallized my own understanding of what truly mattered. Success wasn't measured in family approval, corporate titles, or even financial achievements. It was found in the alignment between values and actions, in the courage to define worth on one's own terms, in the impact created through authentic purpose. My phone buzzed with a text from Jamie. Thank you for showing me what's possible when you stop shrinking to fit other people's expectations. Georgetown won't know what hit them. I smiled, typing back, they absolutely will, because you'll make sure your impact is both felt and measured. That's the Vargas trait worth keeping. The following morning, I arrived at Eclipse headquarters earlier than usual. The weekend maintenance staff had just finished cleaning, and the building held that particular quiet that precedes a day of purposeful activity. In my office, I unpacked a small box I'd brought from home, the framed newspaper clipping my mother had given me months ago, showing my high school self celebrating that first science scholarship. I placed it not on my main credenza where visitors would see it, but on a smaller shelf near my desk, visible primarily to me, a reminder not of family validation, but of the consistent thread of purpose that had guided my choices long before external success arrived. Beside it, I placed a new frame containing a simple quote I'd discovered during a particularly challenging period of building Eclipse. Your worth is not negotiable. Your expression of it is your choice. As the office gradually filled with the energy of my team, brilliant, committed people drawn together by shared purpose rather than family obligation, I felt a profound sense of alignment. Not the shallow satisfaction of proving critics wrong, but the deeper fulfillment of building, something authentic and meaningful despite them. My assistant appeared in the doorway. The community partners for the Leadership Institute are here for the planning session. I'll be right there, I replied, glancing once more at the quiet reminder on my shelf. The garage apartment had been a symptom of how others valued me, not a reflection of my actual worth. The signature they suddenly needed had always been valuable. They just hadn't recognized it. And in that disconnect lay an important truth. External validation, while occasionally pleasant, was ultimately unreliable and unessential. True power came not from others' recognition, but from the quiet certainty of knowing your own value and living accordingly, sleeping in garage apartments when necessary, but never internalizing the judgment such assignments implied. As I joined the meeting with community leaders who would help shape the Leadership Institute, I carried that certainty with me, not as arrogance, but as the grounded confidence that comes from building success on a foundation of authentic purpose. And that, perhaps, was the most valuable signature of all. Not the one that authorized acquisitions or approved strategies, but the unique imprint of a life lived on its own terms, creating impact that extended far beyond balance sheets or family approval. The garage apartment, in the end, had been not just a slight to overcome, but a gift that clarified everything. A cramped space that ultimately expanded my understanding of true freedom and authentic success. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.